Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Word Balloon, and it's Mainframe Comic-Con and Bat Black Friday. We are recording this on Monday afternoon, but we will be playing this on Friday for the Bat Black Friday audience. That's one of the reasons why you saw that commercial for Jock prints. We have a lot of other great artist prints and slam books, autographs, all waiting for you at mainframecomiccon.com. All right, commercial over. And now I want to welcome to Word Balloon and our Bat Black Friday event, J.H. Williams III, who is in parts unknown in the witness protection program, as I say. You've got an Orson Welles quality in terms of your lighting. That great horror anthology show back in the day. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I guess it's like I'm a little backlit, aren't I?
That's all right, man. That's all right. I like it. It's mysterious.
Okay. I don't like being on video anyway, so.
Well, there you go. It's all right, Jim. Jim, I understand it. I really appreciate you doing this, and you're not the only creator to tell me that, so you're very kind to be in silhouette. That's all right. So again, what secrets of big tobacco are you going to reveal for us today, Jim? It's like 60 minutes. You're gonna have your voice like, well, I started working for
right.
Bennett and Bowles. Go on. So anyway. Dude, I'm excited to talk to you not only about what you've got coming up, but also if it's okay, we really want to hear about your time on Batwoman and starting with your great collaboration with Greg Rucka and continued beyond Greg's run, but a very important run, I think, and an important character that immediately hit the ground running because of Greg's great writing and your mind-blowing art. Tell me how the collaboration began.
Well, it was kind of out of happenstance, really. At the time, if I remember everything correctly, I was supposed to return to do Batman stuff on Detective Comics with Paul Dini. That didn't, for whatever reason, that didn't work out the way it was supposed to. I only did one issue. Then I ended up doing those three issues with Grant Morrison on the regular Batman stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And DC was very interested in me returning to continue doing Batman stuff, but they weren't sure in what way. And then the editor, at the time, Pete Tomasi, brought up Batwoman with Greg Rucka, and asked what I thought of that, and kind of explained a little bit to me about it. And I thought it was a great idea because, for one, not only was I getting to do Batman universe stuff, but it was an opportunity to kind of work on something mostly from the ground up.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of like inventing our own things within the Gotham City universe stuff, and that was kind of appealing to me rather than oh hey, here's our Joker story or here's our Two-Face story with Batman. I mean, as fun as that stuff is, it wasn't as enticing to me as, say, getting to work with that stuff from the ground up with Batwoman.
Absolutely. Now, am I right, Jim? Did she first appear in the 52 Weekly story before your guys' story began?
Yeah, I believe so. I didn't know much about that at the time, and kind of was like, even though I knew Greg was going to acknowledge that stuff, in some ways we kind of hit the ground running on her own title inside Detective Comics, with a fresh start, I guess you could say.
I understand, yeah.
Which allowed us to kind of really set the tone of what to expect from the character, not just from Greg's writing, but from a visual standpoint too.
100%, Jim, honestly, and I've got examples of panels that I want to show. I loved how you were framing the action. Here's a great example right here. Who was your colorist on this, Jim? Forgive me for not remembering. Is it Todd Klein?
Todd did the lettering.
He did lettering, yeah.
Yeah. Dave Stewart did the colors.
Of course. Man,
yeah.
Truly, man.
Right?
Yeah. Vivid, beautiful combination, absolutely. And had the design existed before you came on, or did you design Batwoman's look?
There was a basic color scheme chosen, like the red and the black was already kind of chosen by DC. I don't know who thought to use those colors originally. So my answer to that is DC management. I mean, it might have come from somebody else. I don't know.
Okay.
Where my aesthetic came in is how do I work with what they're showing me and enhance it. So, the boots, the belt, the arm bracers, all that kind of stuff, little flourishes here and there, was my touches. Looking for ways to make the mask seem more plausible, I guess you could say, rather than just a pullover sort of thing. Little flourishes like that. And also for me, I had to think about, why red and black. Greg and I talked about that a little bit in terms of what can we say about why red and black. What's the point of that? So it didn't seem like they were arbitrary decisions. Yeah.
It's funny. Henry Barajas says he remembers seeing the original pages at Morrison Con. Was that Vegas event that the iFanboy guys in Morrison put together?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was put together from Isotope.
Yes, James Simon as well. Exactly. Yeah. Yes, indeed. No, I remember that event well. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think who else was involved in that? It was Isotope and Ron Richards, I think, was involved in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Ron's part of was part of iFanboy. It's funny. I was talking to him this morning as he was setting up a Chris Claremont talk for me. So
cool.
An embarrassment of riches, indeed. I talked to Chris in the morning, talked to Jack this afternoon, and now you and I are talking.
Ron's a nice guy. I like him.
Really, really good guy. Absolutely. So tell me about as we saw the example, and I'm going to bring up more examples. But tell me about this framing that you were doing. Now, this is an ad for, I assume, it's the first. It looks like it's an ad for the first trade, but just really interesting choices in terms of how you're setting up these panels.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to put into words, really. I don't know. It's like comics should have movement, and they've always been about movement. Frame A to B to C. Giving you a visual narrative. But I always try to find, if I can, if the scene allows, I try to find ways to enhance the fluidity of that.
Sure.
And sometimes that means taking like some of those examples, taking a shot and breaking down the action across a 2-page spread where you're setting the stage with the whole scene, but then the characters move through the scene, but the background is stationary.
I'm with you.
So that adds to the idea of how comics can be moving even though they're not.
Absolutely. This is interesting. Ed asks a question. Was the red in Batwoman a hint to the character's temperament? We think Red Hood and know that character. We see red hair, red bat symbol. We think ... maybe a temper.
I don't know. It's something. It's something I hadn't really considered.
Yeah,
I always looked at it as more of a metaphysical choice, in the fact that she was a military person, uh, and in you know some practices of metaphysics, colors represent different things, and red and black are colors of war.
sure.
And I kind of look, and she was kind of this warrior type of character. She was a soldier, and so I kind of, for me, that's how I looked at it. I did, but in terms of red fitting her temperament, it fits that too because she is a fiery individual.
Absolutely. I always thought too that it was an obvious choice based on the Batmobile, and
Oh,
especially the classic Batmobile of '66, and those colors work so well. And
yeah,
it's like, yeah, no, it's separate from the Bat family, but also part of the Bat family with that look.
yeah, I agree. And also, like, because early on, we kind of talked about it. Didn't get We didn't get to play with it enough in her stories, but we talked about her also being a musician. And I
Oh, I
always,
didn't realize. I didn't remember that. That's fantastic.
yeah, and so I always kind of thought, the red and black was kind of rock and roll too, um, which is also what led to a lot of some of the design choices being used for some of the panel shapes, where I would use like lightning bolt shapes, even though they were black. Um, Sort of those zigzag shapes, which to me feels like rock and roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I just love, and it evokes the '66 Batman show. But
Uh-huh.
those panels where you did have, the bat symbol kind of framing what you were doing,
Yeah.
and again, I don't. Maybe they did that in the '60s because I know, at least from a tone standpoint, they leaned really heavily into the show when it was on twice a week, and who can blame them
Yeah.
back then? And sadly, the schlockiness of it stayed around even a little bit longer than the television show did. Thank God Denny and Neil Adams came along and kind of gave Batman his balls back, frankly. And but I really it really, Jim, the way you framed these pages really made us stop and like read it that much longer and really appreciate what you were doing on the page because it was so unconventional. Did you, or it's funny thinking of the Silver Age. Guys like Neil Adams and Steranko played with panel progression as well. Are
Yeah.
they influences on you in any way?
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, Steranko, yeah, definitely a big influence. Any of those guys who played with design or thought about what the page could do, Eisner certainly thought a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
Jim Starlin thought a lot of that stuff. But when you go back and look at a lot of older comics, particularly from the '70s, even late '60s, I would say, you know, you'd be surprised at what you come across in terms of understanding and playing with design, knowing that they're working in in the visual medium that can rely on design. There's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of old comics that people, uh, I think, over time gets maybe forgotten. Um, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And a couple more questions from the fans. Nerdette's Newsstand wants to know, what do you make of having this character you drew and put your heart into become a TV show that is beloved by so many? Yeah. What is that like?
I don't know. I mean, I feel so separate from it in a lot of ways because the comic is the comic. You know, um, it's cool. It's cool that it's something we did um, inspired someone to make a TV show, but at the same time, I feel like I'm so separate from that part of it, and you know,
They
just more
never
gratified about the work itself, I guess.
because again your look was so distinct and again they're kind of stuck in the traditional television box, but
Yeah,
nobody in art direction or cinematography or anything ever contacted you about what your thoughts, your point of view.
no, no.
No.
I got one email from one of the writers on the show. I can't remember her name, um, unfortunately, but she sent an email basically just saying, hey, this was a really cool character you guys have created here, and that she was looking forward to doing something with it, for TV.
Sure. And now it's going to be interesting moving on to the next season when we've got an entirely different character
Mm-hmm.
taking the mantle, and that's going to be interesting. And I applaud what they're doing. I feel terrible for God, I'm forgetting her, Ruby Rose. Yeah, Ruby
Yeah,
Rose,
Ruby Rose.
and seriously, I've heard other lead actors in television shows talk about how demanding it is to be number one on the call sheet, as they say, and really have to be in virtually every scene, and also such a physical role,
Uh-huh.
men and women. That really it was just painful. So
Yeah,
I certainly feel for her, and I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I am intrigued with the idea of a new lead having to come in and how they're going to handle that once whenever production starts up again.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I,
Greg,
I,
go
I
ahead.
def-
No, please, Jim. Yeah, if you got thoughts on that.
no, I think it's definitely an interesting choice for casting. Um, It'll be fascinating to see where things go. One of the things I've noticed a lot about the the TV DCU stuff is how a lot of it has become its own thing. Uh,
Yes,
they'll pull little tidbits of pieces here and there from the comics, but it's really grown into its own thing. So it's almost as if that stuff it's like another side of the DC universe, I guess you could say, another
sure.
iteration of it, which is interesting.
Well, even as they play with parallel Earths, you
Yeah,
could literally see a comic book Earth, being part of their multiverse.
yeah.
So I can understand that. Greg McKeon says, speaking of your detective issue with Dini, your mirrored face villain in that issue jumps from the page with the constant movement in that character's mask. What
Uh-huh.
inspired that design? Very good question.
Uh, there's just something Dini wrote. He wrote is like this guy has no features. It's just a shiny silvery mask as the defining thing about him. Um, uh, I think the thing that I added to it was his fashion sense. I guess you could say it was a little, like a little kooky and 1970s looking. I guess you could say. So I added that to it to kind of make him even more weird.
Cool.
Yeah.
And now, Dini, and I want to ask about other writers that you've collaborated as well. But given that Dini was an artist, did he ever? And he only did the one issue, I guess. Did he give you breakdowns, or did he pretty much let you cut loose and do your thing?
He just wrote a standard script, panel by panel.
Sure.
Um, of course, the best comics writers know uh, to leave enough room to play. So, like, if you need to add a panel or set a different kind of tone, or things like in that issue, as example, with the Bruce Wayne stuff, when he's as Bruce Wayne, I purposefully drew those scenes in a different style versus when he's running around as Batman. So that sort of stuff, that's where I have the freedom to kind of like set the tone and create some stylistic things visually to make different scenes stand out, and it makes you feel different things about those scenes when you're reading them, even if it's subconsciously.
100%, man. Absolutely. And I've had numerous conversations with Greg about Batwoman and your guys' collaboration.
Uh,
And I know he really, really appreciated what you did and everything. Tell me about working with Greg and really figuring this out. I mean, did you let him know that, hey, I'm going to be framing Pat?
oh, I lost you. Can you hear me? No, he's on there. I just can't hear him.
Hey, I thought I'd just jump right in here while he's fixing his little technical issue. I think what he was kind of asking was sort of development of characters and stuff like that with Mr. Rucka.
So yeah, working with Greg was a really, really rewarding process. It was super collaborative, probably the most collaborative, one of the most collaborative experiences I've had outside of, I don't know, Alan and Neil. It was pretty collaborative with Grant too, but in a different way because it was such a short commitment. With Batwoman, Greg and I, we would talk on the phone a lot, sometimes before he would write or sometimes as he was writing, and he would talk to me about, different scenes. And of course, they're going to spark different ideas in my head, and I would try to convey those to him on how the scene could move. And he would work that stuff into the scripts. So in that sense, it was very similar to my relationship with Alan Moore on Prometheus, where we would talk a lot ahead of time. So it was super collaborative. You can't beat that kind of experience.
Yeah. But a couple more. Man, the questions in the comments section are just flying in like rain. This one comes from Nerdad's Newsstand. What do you make of Future State or the upcoming Omniverse?
I don't know. I don't know enough about those things to really say.
We got another one from Stephen Ernest that says, Mr. Williams' work on Prometheus was wonderful and amazing. Experimental layouts, every issue had a page frame design. It must have been a challenge illustrating Moore's notoriously detailed script. Any thought on... Okay, I think John's just fixing his difficulties back in the background. Any thoughts on illustrating Moore's notoriously detailed script?
Oh, yeah. There was so much information in those scripts that actually I enlisted my wife to be a researcher. So she would actually read the scripts before I would. And she would research stuff that she saw in there, and she would highlight different things in them for me to pay attention to. So much so that, every once in a while, Alan would actually address her in the scripts because he knew that she was doing a lot of research for me in order so I could focus on, getting the art done. And even with that, it still was a very long, arduous task to read that stuff. The most notorious one is probably the issue, can't remember which issue number it is, maybe issue 15. It's the one that has the Mobius strip in it. Alan's single-spaced paragraphs, I think, went for 3 or 4 pages at least to describe this Mobius strip. One paragraph. And it was very mind-twisting to such an extent that even me and my wife, Wendy, were like, what the hell? How do we make sense of this? And so in order for us to figure it out, we ended up making a Mobius strip model out of a ribbon to see if we could wrap our heads around the 3 dimensions of it. And what was fascinating about that is that's what I based the drawing on, was the ribbon. And after I was done with it and showed it to Alan, he was... it was so funny because he was like, oh, you came up with a completely different working Mobius strip than what I described. That's really interesting.
Wow.
But even though Alan's scripts are notoriously detailed, the thing that a lot of people don't understand, it's just not conveyed enough when people talk about it, is he will go for paragraphs or about a certain thing describing all the stuff, but he almost all the time would say, but if you see it differently, do it differently. So he, as detailed as he was, you still had the freedom to do things the way you think they will work for you. As long as the story is intact, that's what he would care about. So
That's awesome, man. And forgive me if my microphone sounds different. I had to switch microphones. And thank you, Chuck, for coming through with the fan questions while we were doing it. Prometheus is going to be one of these comics that, and I know they've already written books about Promethea that I do believe will be studied for decades to come. Truly, that is really just an exceptional collaboration. We'll get back to that. I want to give you more compliments from the art world. Sal Abenati, terrific artist, one of the best, and tremendous compositions. Agreed. And Prometheus is certainly a good example of that. And then Greg McKeon asks, he wants to know the origin story of how Prometheus came about. As I understand it, you weren't the first choice for Alan Moore. So yeah, tell us, like, as much as you know prior to you joining, and then as you came on.
Let's see, how do I make this as concise as possible? Okay, so I get a call from Scott Doombier out of the blue while I was working on, I believe it was Son of Superman at the time with Howard Chaykin.
Yes.
And he said, hey, we're interested in you for this new Alan Moore thing called America's Best Comics and this title called Promethea. He gave me like the little tidbits of, like just the germ of it. But he said, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't know if we want to go with you. There's other people that we're looking at first, but would you be willing to send over, samples? And so I'm like, of course, yeah. So I sent over samples, just stacks of photocopies. At the time, the internet wasn't really a thing, so you couldn't just send over a PDF or whatever. So you snail mail stacks of photocopies, and then he would send those over to Alan. And I sent over the bulk of the work I did on Chase, and probably some other more current samples of things. I can't remember specifically.
Sure.
I sent that over, and then I finally get a phone call back from them and say, okay, Alan saw this stuff. He says, you're the guy. Do you want to do it? And at the time I was like, I don't know, I was in a career flux and I wasn't sure what kind of decisions I wanted to make. And I was like, well, can I think about it? And Scott was like, what is there to think about? It's Alan Moore. And I'm like, I got to think about it. And I hang up the phone and immediately I'm freaking out and super excited, and kind of saying, to my wife, I'm like, this is insane. And she's like, you should do it. And all this stuff. And so I ended up agreeing to do it. But one of the things I found out after the fact, which was super interesting, is that one of the ways my name came up in the running was I was recommended from two other people to Scott. Scott wasn't overly familiar with my work at the time. So Todd Klein and Alex Ross both, directed Scott to look at what I was doing.
Wow.
And that's sort of how Scott thought to at least give me a shot. The cool thing is Scott has told me on more than one occasion that even though I wasn't the first choice, that after all was said and done, he couldn't imagine any other choice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which was, very gratifying to hear that when, you weren't in the top of the running.
Understood. Jim, and really, was it a conscious thing to radically change your style? Because you look at Chase, there are beautiful panels in Chase, but it is really different from Promethea. And both are very different from Batwoman. So do you try to reinvent yourself on these, when you get these kinds of projects?
In a way, I don't consciously try to do it. I just knew that, when I was like,
no worries, man. Exactly. All of a sudden, it's a Stephen King movie. They cut the lights on you.
I just knew that. Okay, so like one of the last things we did in Chase before we got the acts on that series. Just, DC did that big giant crossover, the DC 1 million.
Yes.
And so our last issue of Chase ended up being Chase 1 million, which was weird unto itself. But that issue presented some, besides some other tidbits here and there inside Chase as a whole, that issue in particular presented some unorthodox layouts. And I knew enough of Alan's work, being a huge fan of him to begin with, that I think it was something that he would appreciate.
Sure.
And I would like to think when it was some of those more unorthodox things that I sent over copies of that made him go, yes. And I always knew Alan was like really into experimentation. So when we started on Promethea, I felt like, okay, here's an opportunity. This is a brand new series, nothing unlike anything anyone has seen before, even though it has influences, of course. What do we do with it that will make it stand out? And creating something from completely the ground up, brand new world building. You're not even relying on the fact that, oh, this is taking place in Gotham City or anything like that. It's all fresh. Kind of told me in my mind that here's an opportunity, particularly because of the content. The content was about creativity and imagination, Promethea being the goddess of imagination and things like that. It's instinctually told me, how far can we push things? Here is the perfect opportunity for me to go, what can I do? What, ideas that I have, what can I bring to the table to really stretch myself and grow? And when I spoke to Alan about that sort of stuff, of course, he was right there, and both of us were willing to jump over a cliff at that point to try to make this thing as unique as we could.
Yeah.
And so, but, I don't consciously think of, style changes or whatever. I do put some analytical thought into it, but a lot of that stuff, in terms of design or shifting styles or whatever like that, most of it comes from gut reactions. What is the scene telling me it needs to be? As an example, one of the things I'm working on right now, series called Echolands, which will be coming out later. I'm working on a scene that involves stuff that I want to look like old horror comics.
Fantastic.
It's appropriate to the story. So to me, the story kind of dictates what to do visually, what it needs to be. If it means, in Batwoman having Kate Kane's day life, as you could say, be this clean, linear style versus the murky, painterly watercolors and deep shadows of her Batwoman life, those say things about the story and the character involved in that. Even if it's stuff that isn't immediately recognized by the writer as saying something about it. It's almost like a commentary that you're making, but the commentary enhances what the story is doing, I guess you could say. I don't know if any of that was clear, but
no, I want to hear your thoughts of and descriptions of the collaboration, and I think that's great. And again, it's this incredible body of work that will speak for itself. And it's funny, I didn't even think while we were talking about Chase, and it suddenly dawned on me that Greg brought her back and used her recently in his Lois Lane run.
Oh,
and I thought that was interesting. Well, and Bendis also had Chase and also Mr. Bones in his thing. And yeah, Mr. Bones is such a fun character. And I know he appeared in Infinity Inc. before you guys got to play with him.
Yeah. We got the way we ended up with Mr. Bones was when we turned in the pitch for Chase. We were talking to the editor and like, we want, if we can, we want the director of the DEO to be supposedly, a villain that's trying not to be a villain anymore. And so we're like, who can we have? Give us somebody. And they're like, well, what do you think of Mr. Bones? And we're like, Okay, that sounds awesome, especially when you think about what he looks like.
Absolutely.
As the director of this government, spooky government agency, and of course, he wasn't the reformed villain that he tries to portray.
Anytime we can see a cigar smoking skeleton, sign me up. I'm there.
Right.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
he's great.
In a suit.
Seriously.
In a suit.
In a suit, absolutely, man. And I remember he had like a full kind of supervillain costume back in the 80s. But no, I loved it. You're right, in the suit and everything. It's so great. It reminds me of those harsh kind of nuclear posters we'd get of a skeleton in a suit, things like that, or no smoking kind of poster campaigns of those kind of images. So yeah, to turn him into a real character is just outstanding. And it's funny. Go ahead.
In that black suit and tie, and he's smoking a cigar, standing in front of American flag. He immediately becomes this enigmatic visual of the things you don't trust about secretive government.
Indeed.
Just in that one visual, you start to go, "Oh, there's something up here."
Yeah, he's a walking conspiracy. Absolutely, man. Yeah, something's not right. Absolutely. No, it's fantastic. Isham Zuba pays you a nice compliment and says regarding working with Alan Moore, he says, I think the better question is for Alan Moore to be asked what it was like to work with J.H. Williams. You elevate every project you're involved in. Nice compliment. We couldn't agree more. Absolutely,
Thank you
man.
very much.
No question.
Cheers.
Here. Indeed. Take a sip. And let me ask you about those three issues with Grant Morrison. And again, shame on me for not doing my research. We'll see how my memory is. Was it like League of Batman kind of era? What was your story again?
Yeah.
Boom. All right. Awesome, man. Again, a great. And this is what I loved about Grant's run, and I'm so glad you were a part of it. To bring back those '50s throwaway characters that were in one story, and make a meal of it like you guys did. That was I mean, you nailed it. And certainly that was just what Grant was doing with that entire run of his that ended with Batman R.I.P.
Yeah, it was a fantastic idea to use these old characters, but make it a murder mystery story.
Yes.
It's like the type of tale you wouldn't expect to see them in, it was so much fun. And for me, getting to kind of toy with, again, because you brought up style changes, in that story, I kind of was like looking at ways to, the way Grant wrote that is if these guys are still running around, even though we haven't seen them for forever, which I thought was fantastic. So I kind of like, well, if they're still running around, what do their stories look like? What do their comics look like? We just haven't seen their comics, right? So I kind of like thought about how would they look stepping out of their stories into a Batman story. And that's where I came up with the idea of putting each one in their own unique look, I guess you could say, artistic.
Yes.
But somehow still work together on the page where they can stand next to each other and you notice the styles, but at the same time, you don't question it. You don't go, well, why? You go, oh, interesting. And it, I think, helped build a subconscious thing for the reader to inform a little bit about each of their personalities, even though they might not be speaking. Just the visual alone tells you something, about who they are.
Absolutely, man. So was that Dick Sprang who drew that original story, or was it Shelley Moldoff? I mean, I don't know. And when you looked at the original story, obviously you were taking their costumes, but building on those. Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, and again, something I probably read, and you probably did too, in one of those 100-page spectaculars of the '70s when they would reprint all that stuff.
Yep.
That's fantastic. Did you ever read too the Batman Encyclopedia that Michael Fleischer put together?
No, I have not read that. That's got to be a daunting task to.
Well, there was just it was a reference book, but it was just fun because it would have all these inserts, paragraphs on these characters, and it's like, well, who the hell is that? Who's Batman Jones? I don't know who Batman Jones is, and that was the fun of Grant's run. And
I should put that down.
Yeah, that'd be cool to look that stuff up again. So were there Batman artists that were inspired by when you would do your thing with Batman, or did you stay away from it because you wanted to, kind of put your own mark and not be influenced by others?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that I consciously did. I
Okay.
just kind of, Batman overall, I'd say, is my favorite DC character. And I grew up reading Batman comics, of all kinds, the goofy ones, the serious ones, the stylistically adventurous ones. So all that stuff sort of was floating around in my head. So influences of that stuff probably leaked out in that story, and probably in the Batwoman stuff, and even the Batman stuff I drew before that. Some of those things are living underneath the surface, I'm sure. But I didn't consciously, set out to say, oh, this has got to look like so and so, or this shot, it's got to look like so and so, or whatever. Those things just percolate out. Yeah. So, but there's some places where I was more particular, but I wasn't particular about it when I chose the artist that I was trying to capture the feel of. It was more like, back to the League of Batman story, the Black Love story.
Yes.
Some of those groups of characters, I felt like as I was doing design sketches to see how I felt about each character, different things would come out. So for whatever reason, I don't know why, they just was like, oh, this feels right. So it was more by my gut. So as an example, I think it's called Chief of Bats, right?
Yes. Or yes, close enough. But yeah, the Native American Batman.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
And when I was thinking about him, I'm like, for some reason I keep thinking of a Steve Rude style, classic Steve Rude style.
Sure. Cool.
But then his son, what was his?
Red Raven, I don't remember. Right? Little Raven?
I kept thinking of like a 1970s, more stilted looking style. But then the character, forgive me, I cannot remember his name at the moment. The character that had the big thick
ruffle
with the look like feather shapes, and he had the pointed helmet.
Oh yeah, was that
and the red visor?
So it wasn't the Knight and Squire. It was oh god, because there was the Ranger, the Australian.
Yeah.
The Roman character is the one who gets killed.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
That character, I can't. For whatever reason, I can't remember that character's name. But
I can't either, man.
when I saw what he, the basics of him, I'm like, he looks like he's out of Watchmen or something.
Funny.
And so that's what I was trying to capture with that guy. And then when it's revealed that he's actually, he takes off the helmet and he's revealed to be someone else in the part of the group, I tried to figure out, like, when we see his face, there's like this weird amalgam of the two characters. I don't know.
That's awesome, man. I also, when Batwoman debuted, Batman was unstuck in time, and then right, and it was 52, but I know it wasn't. Dick Grayson was Batman. This is around the time of Black Mirror. In fact, I talked to Jock earlier today, and about his story. But I remember talking about that with Greg. And were you conscious of? It was a flashback moment when Batman first appears in that first Batwoman arc. But it was kind of, and again, he was in the shadows. And I asked Greg, I'm like, is that Bruce or is that Dick? And he said he felt he left it purposely ambiguous. I don't know if you were consulted and how you took it and how it should look.
I took it as being Bruce. That it was definitely Bruce Wayne, because at the time when Kate Kane was lost and trying to find herself after being unceremoniously let go from the military, and that first encounter where she just took care of a mugger, and Batman shows up out of the alley and gives her a hand up. I figured that was long enough ago that it was probably Bruce for me.
Okay.
But when she started in her own title, because that storyline was in Detective Comics. But when we did Batwoman for the New 52 and Batman shows up in there, this is kind of interesting because we started working on that stuff before all the Flashpoint stuff and all the changeover of the universe and all that kind of stuff. So we had written and drawn that scene when Batman shows up in Batwoman's title for the first time as being Bruce Wayne. And so but then everything got changed, and we had to figure out through some edits of dialogue and some slight alterations of art, how to convert that to be Dick Grayson. So that was pretty fascinating.
Interesting. Absolutely, man. The viewers are playing Jim Williams' greatest hits and asking a lot of good questions. And Greg mentions your Jonah Hex issue. And man, I'll tell you, Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray got the greatest group of artists, including yourself, to do these. Where are you on Westerns? Was that a challenge, or was that something you really wanted to do? How did you get the gig?
I so wanted to do it. I love Western comics. The greatest Western comics are by, Mobius, the Blueberry stuff.
Lieutenant Blueberry, absolutely.
Yeah. But I love the old Kirby Westerns, and I like,
Severin?
Yeah, Severin. I think, didn't Russ Heath do some too?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And of course, De Zuniga's run on Jonah Hex. And, I've got to, in fact, I always say, man, I really got to take like a camera and like sweep the room, because on this side of me, there's a great Jonah Hex commission I got from Tony about 10 years ago.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, I love that stuff. And I always felt like, man, I could really sink my teeth into just doing a straight up Western series. And so I can't remember how the Hex story came to me. I think, Jimmy and Amanda both were sharing a booth space with this big booth collective that we had at San Diego.
Sure.
And I think it came up during one of those San Diego cons where, telling him how much I love the Hex stuff. And he's like, oh, I'll write one for you. And I think that's probably how that came about. And he actually wrote me a second one that I drew 2 or 3 pages of, but then had to set it down because of other DC commitments.
Sure.
And I never got back to it. It just never happened. And then the series changed, and other changes at DC and so on. But yeah, I loved doing that issue. It was so much fun. Great story too that they gave me. It was such a weird tale. It was fantastic.
It was an amazing run, and most of the stories were one and done back then in that classic run. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Some of the best comics that DC has put out in the last 20 years, no question.
Yeah, there should be a giant omnibus of that run, right?
Dude, so true. Absolutely true. No question. Mike Del Alfonso wanted to know, he came in late. What was your first professional job?
It depends on what you define as professional. When I was trying to be a professional artist in comics, I did some weird stuff. When I lived in the Bay Area, I did like some pencils and inks for this thing called PC Magazine.
Okay.
I can't remember what the stories were. I remember drawing some independent issue for this one about, it was sort of like a Doc Savage character, but it was all super science fiction-y stuff. I remember doing something with that.
Okay.
I remember doing a couple pinups for a comic that actually got published when I lived in Atwater, California, for this thing called Alternate Existence or something like that. I did a couple pinups, and they were wanted me to draw the next issue, but the thing completely imploded. It was beyond an indie, it was like really small stuff. And I went from there to not really getting much work for a long time. And I think the next, bigger things I got, which paid a little bit of money, was 4 issues of Demonic Toys.
Oh, sure.
I did a couple short story issues for I think it was called, what was the name of that series? I want to say Hero Alliance, but I don't know if that's correct.
Okay.
And I did an issue of Twilight Zone.
Fantastic.
All of my work on all that stuff was terrible. It was awful. It's like, but you got to start somewhere.
Sure. What was your first big 2 book then?
Probably DC Showcase.
Oh, cool.
I did a short story for DC Showcase. Learned a lot from Neil Posner.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice guy. Had a lot of patience for me, which surprised, thinking back in retrospect, surprises me, and very gracious of him to be so patient with a young artist. Getting notes from him about, where's this character's hips? What's going on here? Kind of notes, was really great. That ended up being inked by George Freeman.
Okay.
For those not familiar with his stuff, one of the things he's really well known for is Captain Canuck.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Hilarious. He did some Elric stuff too. He did the inks over that story. It was like, and I got to draw a brand new Green Lantern character out from, one of the Green Lantern Corps characters. It was like a little, maybe 8-page story sort of thing. And that was probably the first thing for DC. And then I went from that rapidly to doing some stuff for Milestone.
Oh, that's great, man. Excellent.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I did 6 or 7 issues for them.
Wow, that's cool. Jim, have you ever done a Batman Black and White? Or are you part of the new run that's coming?
Technically, I have. It's just not been published yet.
I was going to say, or you're part of the new run.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
In December.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Who did you collaborate with on that one?
Me, myself, and I.
Oh, a solo thing. Jim, there you go. Honestly, I think I had the roster, and I'm sure I saw your name on there. I don't want you to spoil because I'm sure it's a short story. What generally can you tell us about this story?
It was fun. Well, it was a challenge because, I wanted to do something that spoke to all of Batman history, not just as a story, but as a character in our own world. So it's got a lot of meta commentary to it. It's very timely. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
We'll see. It'd be interesting to see what people think about it. But there's a lot of Batman's personal reflection about who he is and where he came from and where he is now, and what that might mean for his future. It's all a lot of subtext there. I don't come out and hit you over the head with that stuff, but that's kind of what I'm commenting on. That was a lot of fun to get to do. That's the great thing about the Batman Black and White stuff is the experimentation. You can
absolutely
kind of throw a lot of different things at the wall. It was cool. They also let me do the variant cover for that issue too. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's excellent. No, Jim, you're right. And in fact, Alex Ross was telling me about his Paul Dini story that they did together, case study about the Joker, which is something we'll be playing in an hour or so, and or maybe a couple hours from the pre-show that
nice.
Chuck and I will be doing later tonight, and playing clips from other Bat creators. And that is, and in fact, Jill Thompson will be joining us on the proper Batman Black and White panel. And she had a very weird kind of meta story. And it's been fun reading the old Black and White stuff and reminding myself of the experimentation that was going on in that series. I'm so glad it's back. And that's great. And because Mike was like, "Wait a minute, they didn't let you publish. They didn't publish your black and white story." No, it's coming, man. It's coming next month. It'll be in the
Yeah,
first issue, and
yeah,
Jim's got a variant, so that's awesome.
yeah. It was done. I wrote and drew it in the in the middle of
This current
last
situation,
summer,
yeah,
this last summer. So it takes some interesting stock about where things are for people, and how that I tried to basically relate that to Batman relating to that.
interesting. Yeah, Jim, you've
The
been
fun part is the pages are nuts. So because it talks about so much Batman history, I there's all kinds of references in it that I don't bother to give you a text information for those references. There's a lot of visual references as he's thinking about his life. So I allowed the narrative to be one thing and the visuals be another.
great.
And juxtapose those together, and it's pretty cool. I had a lot of fun. I got to do like, goofy Batman to serious Batman to manga Batman, all in a matter of, that's just a little taste, all in a matter of 8 pages, while giving you tidbits of a Batman that I see, who's, older and looking for ways to be wiser, I guess.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to it, man. That's going to be great. I was going to ask how COVID has impacted your creativity. I mean, is it a struggle? Are you able to get through it?
Yeah, it's been hard though. It's exhausting. Not just the pandemic stuff, but everything this last year has been for the country. With the pandemic versus the political side of everything.
Certainly.
I don't know what it is about my personality, but I can't help but be really emotionally affected by that stuff. And so it's been pretty exhausting. I keep finding myself on, weekends when I'm trying to take some downtime, just being just really tired.
I understand, man. And also, even prior to 2020, I know the real world really hit home in Nevada with the Nevada shootings a couple of years ago. That's the last time we talked. And man, anytime there is something wrong, I think societally, you step up, man, and then you've got, I think, positive things that you try to do. You raised money with that anthology, and forgive me, remind me the title of the anthology.
Where We Live.
Where We Live. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. It was put together by me and my wife. We co-curated and co-edited along with an editor and a editor's assistant on that. It took all hands on deck to get that thing together.
Great anthology, and I mean, it's successful. You guys raised decent money.
About $125K.
That is decent money. Well done, man. That's fantastic. God, that's so great to hear, Jim. Seriously, and congratulations to you and your wife and all the collaborators that put that together.
Everyone involved just brought 100% or more. And the thing I'm super proud of, it's hard to say proud when you're dealing with a benefit book about such an awful tragedy.
Yeah.
But on the creative side, how I guess gratifying is a better choice of words, in how everyone stepped up and talked about things in a way that people could relate to and connect to, either emotionally or analytically, and gave them something to think about. And I was proud of everyone who worked on that book. They all did such a great thing.
Absolutely, man. And forgive me, I don't know how to say this name. It seems to be a Russian name, but or I'd forgive me if I'm getting the country wrong. But he's saying it's nice to see your Batwoman omnibus. Congratulations! I didn't realize they had collected all your stuff in an omnibus.
Yeah, that's the plan. I know DC has rearranged their schedules and stuff. That book was supposed to be out already, but I think it got moved to late 2021.
Okay, maybe it'll coincide with whenever the TV show comes
Yeah,
back.
maybe. I think they, with all the pandemic stuff and, which causes a lot of different types of upheaval for people in various ways, it seems like they've shifted a lot of the publication of some things here and there. I don't know if that's will be good for the book or bad for the book, but it is what it is. What can you do, right?
Well, and regardless, I'm glad it's on the schedule and it's coming
Yeah.
out. The gentleman is from Turkey. Excuse me,
Oh,
fellow Mediterranean. Pleasure.
nice.
How do you do? Welcome. And he says he thinks it's coming out in October of next year.
Oh,
So
cool.
we'll see what happens. And so to wrap up, I'll let Mike ask you what beyond, and I'll ask you to repeat it. I know Echo is in the title. What other future projects can you tell us? So we got Batman Black and White coming in just a week or so, and then you're working on your creator own thing,
Yeah.
and that's called again
Echolands.
Echolands. Excellent.
It's not. We haven't. We have formally announced the book, but not have formally announced the book. There'll be, I think the promotion for it will start ramping up after the turn of the year.
Okay.
Which is good. So we finally, I think we've settled on a launch window, unless if there's some other upheaval that takes place between now and then and changes everything again. But I'm drawing issue 6. I'm almost done with issue 6. So it exists. It's real. It's just taking forever to get done. Backtracking a little bit about how tough 2020 has been, it certainly has put an impact on how fast the work can get done. I was commenting to my wife, last week or the week before, that I was working all day and had only drawn 7 figures. So that kind of tells you right there how impactful this stuff is sometimes.
I understand.
And then the other thing that is going to be on its way is a hardcover graphic novel. I don't know when that will be scheduled. That I'm the co-writer of. And there's a couple other things that have been greenlit that I'm the co-writer of, and working with other artists. So
that's great, man.
Yeah,
that's excellent. Well, when Echolands is ready, are you going to crowdfund it, Jim, or do you have a publisher already for it?
Image.
Oh, it's going to be through Image. Wonderful. Congratulations. That's great. That's excellent, man. When you're ready with Echolands, please come back and we'll talk more, and maybe other things will be announced by then. But absolutely, man. And thank you. And seriously, we really appreciate you being part of Bat Black Friday, even in this pre-recorded capacity. And
thanks for having me.
Are you kidding? Absolutely. And then thank you for the great contributions you've made to the Batman mythos and Batman itself, and then of course the co-creation of Batwoman. It's great stuff, Jim, as always. And we always love seeing what evolution will be in your art with the next project. So keep it up, and have a safe and happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. And we'll stay in touch, and we'll talk to you in 2021.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks a lot, man. That's J.H. Williams, everybody. I'm gonna ask him to maybe wait out backstage for us as we wrap up. Thanks a lot for watching. Again, this conversation will be represented on Bat Black Friday. That's on Friday, November 27th. Please join us. It's going to be great. We're going to have art prints from a lot of great creators like Mitch Gerrits and Clay Mann and Jock, and also David Finch. And we're going to have great panels, live panels as well, and make sure that we're hitting both coasts, East Coast and West Coast. So it's really going to be a very full evening of Batman creators all coming together and sharing stories about what it's like working with the Caped Crusader. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, I like to wrap up by saying,